My perspective on men as a group and masculinity has changed so radically over the past few years. I used to speak with such casual disdain about men as a group and what I perceived to be an oppressive patriarchal structure on a daily basis. I really believed that my perspective put me on the right side of history, because I believed that I was standing in solidarity with women who had been victimized by men. But now I see men and the world a lot differently, and I've come to actually appreciate and understand what masculinity actually is, and why it's so important to any functioning human civilization. If you've seen my channel before, you know that this is a project where I am publicly challenging the negative beliefs that I previously developed about masculinity as a young adult. I believe that these biases were hugely influenced by the way that I was taught to see the world in college and in graduate school. So my education gave me insight and knowledge and tools, and I also believe that it gave me a distorted lens, one that encouraged me to see men as inherently problematic, emotionally stunted, or even dangerous as a default. And just so you know, that's not to say that I don't take responsibility for my beliefs, I'm just saying what influenced them. As I began to unlearn that lens and heal my relationship with masculinity as a consequence, my social media algorithms changed so drastically. Most of my social media posts used to be just like mocking men, shaming men, looking at all of these examples of men being terrible people. Here's like 50,000 reasons why you should never trust men. Like, all of those disappeared. They were completely replaced with content that was very respectful toward and even reverent toward men and masculinity, and all of these wonderful examples of men coming to the rescue of someone, or of men doing a really awesome job raising their kids. That shift was so stark that it made me realize that the media I was consuming wasn't just reflecting back my views to me, it was also actively shaping how I was seeing the world. And that's kind of what I want to talk about today. I'm Gabby if you're new here. Welcome back if you're not. When I was in my anti-male era, I was hyper aware of bad male behavior. Every less than stellar interaction that I had with any man became evidence. Every flaw was a pattern. I was constantly, both consciously and subconsciously, collecting evidence that men are always the problem. But as I started engaging with and getting more compassionate and balanced voices on my feed, videos about fatherhood or of masculine strength or protectiveness, I noticed that my awareness in my real life began to change. It became so much easier to see the men who were kind and grounded and protective, and to appreciate how often men show up to take care of others, and how men wield their strength to protect and provide for the people around them. And once I started seeing this, it was like my whole framework for understanding men just started being rewritten. One of the themes that you see a lot on the male appreciation side of the internet is women talking about how nice it is when they're around a man that they feel safe with and they can just shut their brain off and just totally relax and be comfortable.
That's one of the hottest things a man can do, is just let me turn my brain off. If you're trustworthy enough that I don't have to think and just follow you around, count me in, chief.
Yeah.
Holla.
There goes 2 exits to the left. My nearest exit is still in front of me. Well, that guy looks kind of suspicious. Make sure he doesn't get too close to her.
Make my way downtown, walking fast, this person home.
And it's interesting because I think a few years ago, if I would have seen that, I'd have been like, well, the reason that it's necessary for them to be near a man is because of male violence. I need to be protected from men. And my algorithm would have totally agreed with me and said, you're right, Gabby. You really shouldn't appreciate any men going out of their way to make you feel safe. You should only be angry at the existence of bad men.
If women need to be protected, provided for, and empowered, have you ever stopped to question, who do they need to be protected from? Why don't they have access to their own resources? And who took their power in the first place?
And in my heightened emotional state, I would have said, that's a great point, algorithm. I'm gonna stay mad. And that is one way to look at it, for sure. And for a while, it was the only way that I did. But here's the problem. If bad is the only thing that you're focusing on, then bad is the only thing that you're going to see. It's like when you get a new car and you're like, wait a minute, when did everybody get a Ford Focus? You just start seeing it everywhere because it's what you're noticing. Social media does that exact same thing. It teaches our brain what to notice when we're out in the real world. The more that you see something, the more common that your brain is going to think that it is. Psychologists call this an availability heuristic. So when your social media is full of all of the ways that men can be bad, The only thing that you're going to notice in the real world is the ways that men are bad. And that's what happened to me. I stopped seeing men and I started seeing threats. And I have always, my entire life, had great men in my life. But it's not about that, because those men were always exceptions to the rule. Every time that I heard anybody speak about men as a group, it was negative. So negative male behavior became my reference point. It really shaped how I thought about men until I trained my brain to start noticing something else. Because I kept seeing so much bad male behavior online, and then I'd go out in the world and see so many examples of it because my social media was teaching me what to notice, it became an illusion of prevalence. So our brains are like calculators, and sometimes they can make mistakes. And the mistake that my brain was making was that I was seeing only the bad and not the good. So I thought that the bad was way more common than the good is. Obviously, good male behavior is more common than bad male behavior. But our brains aren't rational and they can make mistakes. But my awareness has really changed so much. And while I'm obviously still aware of male violence against women and the threat that dangerous and abusive men pose to women, what I can now also see is the quiet good that men do every day. The protectiveness, the service, the willingness to carry discomfort so that the people around them can rest. I started making a lot of these connections when I was traveling last week and I spent the day with an old friend who is just like someone that just at his core is just a really good person. And usually, like when I'm walking around a new or unfamiliar city, I'm like on high alert and I'm scanning and making sure that like I'm super aware of my surroundings. But on that day with him, I really did not have to do that at all. He was so aware of our surroundings. He was super aware of where I was physically, so I wasn't walking on the side of the street. Like, he was so watchful that I was just relaxing. I was just wandering with not a thought in my head. Like, look at this picture of me. I've got my latte, I've got my smoothie, and there's just no brain activity occurring. And it was so funny because walking down that street, I had the moment where I was like, oh my gosh, this is like what the TikToks were talking about. And I also want to clarify that this is not a simp situation. A simpuation? This is someone who just naturally takes responsibility for the well-being and safety of people around him. It's just how he moves through the world. His behavior had nothing to do with me, and it wasn't performative. It just is how he is. And I think him making that sacrifice to pay attention so that I didn't have to is what is right at the heart of masculinity. Quickly and graciously accepting responsibility to look out for the people around them. And I'm also aware of how there is a lot of pain when it comes to women expressing how they feel or don't feel safe around men. And this is especially the case after the whole man versus bear question went viral. It became controversial for women to say that they would feel more safe with a man than they would with a bear. And obviously, like, there are always going to be some men that will make me choose bear. But the problem was that this question was a huge act of emotional violence against good men who would never hurt a woman. And because it's on social media, the most hateful voices are always going to be the loudest. And going back to the availability heuristic, our brains are just going to think that the most prevalent, the loudest voices are going to be the most accurate because it's presumably the most common, when that's not necessarily true. And while I obviously still believe in awareness of danger, I am, of course, not advocating for ignoring all risk. Men can be dangerous because they are humans, and humans can be dangerous. I can choose to see men as bad, or I can choose to see them as good. And either way I choose, I'm going to find evidence for it. I now choose to see the good of men and masculinity. And it's funny because a few years ago, had I never been on Men Appreciation TikTok, I probably would not have noticed why I had so much fun that day. Because the social media I was consuming was only showing me evidence of why men are bad. But because, like, I had so many examples of men being good, I was like, oh my gosh, there's one right there. Up until this point, I was giving you my reflections and observations, and now I'm going to give you my personal opinion. I've been studying masculinity, and I'm taking this channel very seriously. And I really feel like I've kind of started understanding what the essence of masculinity is. And I believe that showing up as strong in a world that tries to convince you that you're bad and that your masculinity is toxic is one of the most masculine things that a man could do. Holding that groundedness and staying steady and kind and protective in a cultural climate that so often physically and emotionally is abusive and neglectful toward you, that is strength. And that is masculinity. And it matters more than you know and more than you likely realize. I now realize how important it is that we recognize the goodness. of masculinity that protects without asking to be praised for it. If you want to believe in goodness, you need to be looking for it. And if you want to find examples of men being good, you can, but your brain just has to be taught what to look for. My channel has made me confront a lot of my own biases, and here is where I've really landed on a macro scale. We all get to choose how we relate to people. If you believe that all men are bad, your algorithm is going to show you content that proves it. If you want to believe that every woman who speaks kindly about men is just doing it for attention, your feed is going to agree with you. You will find evidence for whatever belief that you've already decided to hold. So choose wisely what you pay attention to, because what you believe will become what you notice, and what you notice will become who you are and how you live. If you want to believe that there are a lot of men and there are a lot of women who genuinely care about men, you can choose to believe that. In the pinned comments, I've listed some of my favorite pro-men content creators. These are all people who stay like pretty balanced, don't go too far into either misandry or misogyny. We all know that's a risk of people working in this space. And we already know that this is one of my videos that's going to get called me this a lot. So I'm going to capitalize and say that you should pick me by liking and subscribing, and I'll see you in the next video. This is Editing Gabby. So I'm working on launching a Patreon right now. One of the things that I've noticed in my work with men is that they generally really appreciate being given like just the tools and clear direction so that they can go figure things out for themselves. So my Patreon is obviously in no way therapy, but I want it to be really focused on actionable mental health and life advice. I'm anticipating that it's going to be kind of like my videos are now, but just a little bit less formal and more conversational, and I'll be able to just share a little bit more of myself. If that's something that you want to be a part of, let me know what you think would be interesting in terms of topics, and drop it in the comments, and put like Patreon in there so that I can like search and see what everyone wants. So cool. Have a great day. I'll talk to you soon.